460,000 men buried alive, all soldiers, all surrendered. A 13-year-old boy gave the order. For 3 days, the earth swallowed screams. This wasn't battle. This was industrial extermination. And that child, that monster with a crown, would become the first emperor of China. His name was Qin Shi Huang. But before blood ran like rivers, before heads rolled by the millions, you need to understand something crucial. China didn't exist, not as we know it. 7 kingdoms tearing each other apart for 250 years. Qin, Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, Qi. 7 serpents eating their own tails. War was permanent. Betrayal was a language. Death was currency. Peasants starved while warlords slaughtered entire cities for a piece of land they'd lose again in 3 months. How do you survive in a world where killing is cheaper than farming? Where loyalty is worth less than the iron of a sword? One kingdom figured it out. Qin, the most brutal, the most feared, the most hated. Their secret wasn't brilliant generals or wise philosophers. It was something worse. Qin turned cruelty into a system. They created one simple law. For every enemy head you bring back, you receive land. Sounds reasonable until you understand the consequences. Qin soldiers didn't fight for glory. They fought for harvests. Every decapitation was an investment. Every massacre was a business opportunity. They turned war into the agriculture of corpses. And it worked. While other kingdoms played politics and signed treaties, Qin sharpened knives and counted heads. Within 30 years, Qin had conquered more territory than all the others combined. But here's the real horror. Qin didn't take prisoners. Qin didn't forgive cities. Qin erased the existence of entire peoples. When they captured a city, inhabitants had 2 options: eternal servitude or immediate death. Most chose death. It was faster. The year doesn't matter. What matters is this. A boy was born in Qin's capital. His name was Yingzheng. His father, a political hostage who became king by accident. His mother, a courtesan who slept with the most dangerous man in the kingdom, Chancellor Lu Buwei. Nobody knows for certain who Yingzheng's real father was. Some say the king. Others swear it was Lu Buwei. What we do know is this. That child was damned from the womb. Yingzheng spent his childhood as a hostage in the enemy kingdom of Zhao. Why? Because that's how diplomacy worked back then. You exchanged children as a guarantee of peace. If your father betrayed the treaty, you died. Simple, clean, effective. Yingzheng lived his first years knowing every night could be his last. Zhao children spat at him in the streets. Adults looked at him the way you look at a pig before slaughter. He learned something vital in those years. Trusting someone is dying slowly. When he was 9, his father died. Yingzheng was called back to Qin, not as the prodigal son, as king. A 9-year-old boy inherited the throne of the most bloodthirsty kingdom in history. Who governs when the king is a child? His mother and Lu Buwei. And that's when the real hell began. Lu Buwei was a merchant who became the most powerful man in Qin. He controlled the army, the treasury, and the queen mother's bed. Yingzheng was nothing more than a puppet with a crown. For 4 years, he watched as Lu Buwei made every decision while he signed documents he didn't understand. But Yingzheng wasn't just any child. He was waiting, learning, memorizing every betrayal, every humiliation, every face that smiled while conspiring. When he was 13, something happened that nobody saw coming. The queen mother, his own mother, fell in love with an impostor, a man named Lao Ai, whom Lu Buwei had supposedly castrated to serve as a eunuch in the palace. But Lao Ai wasn't castrated. It was a lie. And the Queen Mother became pregnant. Twice. Lao Ai, emboldened by his position, began to conspire. He wanted to kill Ying Zheng and place his own children on the throne. The conspiracy was discovered. Lao Ai attempted a coup. It failed. Ying Zheng, at 13 years old, ordered his execution. But this wasn't a normal execution. Lao Ai was tied to 5 chariots, each limb bound to a different horse, the 5th rope around his neck. The horses ran in opposite directions. His body tore like rotten cloth. Blood splattered the dust. Intestines hung from the harnesses. Ying Zheng watched without blinking. He was 13 years old. He showed no emotion whatsoever. But it didn't end there. The 2 bastard sons of his mother, his half-brothers, were executed. The 3 complete clans of Lao Ai were exterminated. Men, women, children, elderly. 4,000 people died for one man's betrayal. Ying Zheng established a precedent. Betraying him didn't just kill you. It killed your past, your present, and your future. It erased your existence from history. His mother was exiled. Lu Buwei, the man who raised him, the man who might technically be his father, was forced to resign. A year later, Lu Buwei committed suicide by drinking poison. Some say it was for honor. Others swear Ying Zheng sent the poison with a note. Drink, or your family dies. Ying Zheng was 14 years old, and there was nobody left between him and absolute power. Now he was the true king of Qin. And he had a vision that would make the world tremble. Unify the 7 kingdoms under one banner. Not through alliances, not through diplomatic marriages, through total annihilation. But here's the problem. Qin was powerful, but the other 6 kingdoms together were stronger. If they allied, Qin would be destroyed. Ying Zheng had a plan. It was called the Strategy of the Serpent. Attack one kingdom while bribing the others to stay neutral. Destroy them one by one. Never give them time to unite. Sounds simple. It was. But it required something nobody else had. Genocidal patience and infinite money. When Ying Zheng was 17, he launched his first campaign. The target, the kingdom of Han. The weakest, the easiest. Ying Zheng sent his general Wang Ben with clear orders. Leave no stone upon stone. Wang Ben besieged the capital for 2 years. Cut off the water, cut off the food, cut off any hope of rescue. When the gates finally fell, the inhabitants were so hungry they had resorted to cannibalism. Qin soldiers entered and found streets full of gnawed corpses. The king of Han surrendered. Ying Zheng accepted. He spared his life, gave him a mansion in Qin, treated him as an honored guest for exactly 3 months. Then he executed him in secret and announced he died of natural causes. Han ceased to exist. First kingdom fallen. The other 5 kingdoms barely blinked. They thought Han was insignificant, an appetizer. They didn't realize Ying Zheng had just tested his method, and it had worked to perfection. Next target, Zhao, the kingdom where Ying Zheng had been a hostage as a child, the kingdom that had humiliated him. Here there would be no mercy. Here there would be revenge. Ying Zheng sent General Wang Jian with 200,000 soldiers. Zhao responded with 300,000. The Battle of Changping had already occurred decades earlier, but Ying Zheng wanted to surpass that massacre. He wanted his name to be synonymous with terror. Wang Jian didn't fight. He waited. He built walls around Zhao's army and simply waited. 6 months. The Zhao army ate the horses. Then they ate the saddles. Then they ate the dead. Finally, they tried to break the siege. It was a massacre. 200,000 Zhao soldiers died in 3 days. The 50,000 survivors surrendered. Wang Jian sent a message to Ying Zheng. What do I do with the prisoners? The answer came in one word: bury them. 50,000 men were forced to dig their own graves. Then they were pushed inside. Alive, the earth fell on them. The screams lasted hours. Some tried to surface. Qin soldiers crushed them with stones. The ground trembled with bodies writhing beneath the earth. When it ended, the field was silent. 50,000 mounds of fresh dirt. No tombstones, no names, just dust and death. Zhao fell, Second Kingdom eliminated. Now the other 4 kingdoms panicked. Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi formed a desperate alliance. But it was too late. Ying Zheng had learned something. Fear is more effective than steel. He sent spies to each kingdom with one mission: bribe the generals, assassinate the ministers, spread rumors of betrayal, poison the wells of trust. While the 4 kingdoms argued about who should lead the alliance, Qin soldiers were already marching. Wei fell next. The kingdom tried to flood Qin's army by breaking the Yellow River dikes. It backfired. The flood killed more Wei citizens than Qin soldiers. When Qin entered the capital, they found a city of corpses floating in mud. The king of Wei was captured. Ying Zheng didn't execute him. He did something worse. He forced him to watch as every member of his court was beheaded one by one. Then he made him write an edict proclaiming Qin as the legitimate rulers. Then, and only then, was he allowed to commit suicide. 3 kingdoms down, 3 to go. Chu was next. The largest kingdom, the richest, the most cultured. Chu had poets, philosophers, and the finest silk in all the land. Ying Zheng sent his best general with 600,000 soldiers and one order: burn everything. Chu's army met them at the Yangtze River. The battle lasted 3 months. Rivers ran red with blood. Bodies clogged the waterways. Fish fed on human flesh for a year afterward. Chu lost. Their king fled. Qin soldiers hunted him through the forest for weeks. When they found him, he was living in a cave, eating roots, covered in his own filth. They dragged him back to the capital in chains. Ying Zheng made him crawl through the streets while citizens threw stones. Then he was locked in a cage and displayed in the city center. He died of starvation 3 weeks later, watching people eat while he starved. 4 down, 2 to go. Yan was desperate. They knew they were next, so they tried something insane. Assassination. A man named Jin Ke volunteered. He approached Ying Zheng in his throne room, carrying a rolled map supposedly showing Yan territory. Yan wanted to give to Qin as tribute. When Ying Zheng unrolled the map, a dagger fell out. Jin Ke grabbed it and lunged. Ying Zheng dodged, barely. The blade cut his sleeve. Guards rushed in and killed Jin Ke, but the damage was done. Ying Zheng had been attacked in his own palace. His response was biblical. He sent every soldier Qin had to Yan, not to conquer, to erase. When Qin reached Yan's capital, they didn't just kill the soldiers. They killed everyone: men, women, children, elderly, livestock. They burned the buildings. They salted the fields. They diverted rivers to flood what was left. Yan disappeared from the map. 5 down, 1 left. Qi was the last kingdom standing. They'd stayed neutral through everything, thinking geography would save them. They were wrong. Ying Zheng didn't even send his full army. He sent one general with a letter: surrender now, or become like Yan. The king of Qi opened the gates without a fight. Yingzheng kept his word. He didn't massacre Qi's population. He just made them slaves. Every citizen of Qi became property of the state. Their children were conscripted into Qin's army. Their daughters were sent to Qin's brothels. Their elders were worked to death building roads. Qi ceased to exist as a kingdom, but continued to exist as a labor pool. 6 kingdoms fallen. 0 left. For the first time in 250 years, there was one ruler over all the land. Yingzheng declared himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. He was 38 years old. He had unified China through systematic extermination, and now he had to hold it together. Here's where most conquerors fail. Conquering is easy compared to ruling. How do you govern millions of people who hate you? Who remember when they were free? Who dream of rebellion? Qin Shi Huang's answer was simple. You don't let them remember. First, he destroyed history. Every book from the 6 conquered kingdoms was collected and burned. Philosophical texts, poetry, histories, medical treatises, everything that reminded people of who they used to be went into the flames. Scholars protested. 460 Confucian scholars gathered outside the palace demanding he stop. Qin Shi Huang invited them inside to debate. They came eagerly, thinking they'd won. He had them all buried alive in a pit outside the palace. While they were still arguing about philosophy, dirt fell on their heads. Second, he standardized everything. Different kingdoms used different writing systems, different currencies, different measurements, different cart axle widths. This made trade difficult and rebellion easy. Qin Shi Huang issued one decree. Everything is now the same. One writing system, one currency, one system of weights. Even cartwheels had to be the same width so they'd fit in the same ruts. If your cart didn't fit the imperial road ruts, it was confiscated and you were fined. If you used Old Kingdom currency, you were executed for treason. Within 5 years, China looked like it had always been one nation. The Old Kingdoms became a memory. Then not even that. Third, he built monuments to himself. The Great Wall wasn't originally his idea. Previous kingdoms had built smaller walls to keep out northern nomads. Qin Shi Huang connected them all and expanded them into something unprecedented. But here's what history books don't emphasize. The Great Wall was built on corpses. An estimated 1 million workers died building it. They worked in shifts until they dropped dead. Their bodies were buried in the wall itself. The Great Wall isn't just stone and earth. It's a mass grave stretching thousands of miles. Families whose sons were conscripted for wall construction held funerals before the boys even left. Everyone knew they weren't coming back. Fourth, he prepared for immortality. Qin Shi Huang became obsessed with living forever. He sent expeditions to find the elixir of eternal life. He consumed mercury pills his alchemists swore would make him immortal. They didn't. They poisoned him slowly. But he had a backup plan. If he couldn't live forever, his death would be so spectacular that he'd live forever in memory. He began construction on his tomb. Not a tomb, an underground palace, a necropolis, a city for the dead. He conscripted 700,000 workers. They spent 38 years building it. Most never saw daylight again. They lived underground, digging, carving, building. The tomb was designed as a replica of his empire. Rivers of mercury flowing through channels representing the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. a ceiling painted with stars and constellations, crossbows rigged to fire automatically at intruders, and an army, 8,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, each with unique facial features, weapons, armor, 8,000 clay warriors to guard him in death. But clay soldiers weren't enough. When Qin Shi Huang died, his advisors followed its final orders. All workers who built the tomb were killed and buried inside so they couldn't reveal its secrets. All concubines who hadn't borne him sons were buried alive with him to serve him in the afterlife. Estimates vary, but somewhere between 10 and 50,000 people were buried alive when Qin Shi Huang died, just to keep his tomb secrets. He died at 49 years old. The mercury he'd been consuming for immortality had poisoned him to death. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so dark. His death was kept secret for months. His advisors didn't want rebellions to start before they secured the succession, so they traveled with his corpse in his sealed carriage, pretending he was alive. In summer heat, for weeks, the smell became unbearable, so they loaded the carriage with rotting fish to mask the stench of the emperor's decomposing body. When they finally announced his death, the empire he'd built through terror immediately began to collapse. His eldest son was passed over. His youngest son, Hu Hai, weak, stupid, easily manipulated, was placed on the throne by the chief eunuch Zhao Gao. Within 3 years, rebellions exploded everywhere. Provinces declared independence. Generals turned warlord. The Qin dynasty, built on 50 years of systematic brutality, lasted exactly 15 years after Qin Shi Huang's death. But here's the twist. China never fragmented again. The Han dynasty rose from Qin's ashes and ruled for 400 years. Then the Jin, then the Tang, then the Song, then the Ming, then the Qing. For over 2,000 years, China remained unified, sometimes under strong rulers, sometimes under weak ones, sometimes under foreign dynasties, but unified. Qin Shi Huang's empire lasted 15 years. His idea of a unified China lasted 2 millennia. So was he a monster or a builder? A tyrant or a visionary? The answer is both. Obviously both. He buried 460,000 soldiers alive. He burned books and buried scholars. He built the Great Wall on 1 million corpses. He created a surveillance state where families spied on each other. He erased entire kingdoms from existence. But he also unified China for the first time in history. He standardized writing, currency, measurements. He built roads connecting the entire empire. He created administrative systems that lasted centuries. He proved that a unified China was possible. The question isn't whether he was evil. He was. The question is, was the evil worth it? Chinese historians have argued about this for 2,000 years. Some say he was China's greatest emperor. Others say he was its worst tyrant. Both are right. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The systems he created through brutality, centralized government, standardized culture, unified administration, became the foundation of Chinese civilization. Every dynasty that came after him used his blueprint. They just tried to do it with less massacring. Usually, his tomb still exists. It was discovered in the 1970s when farmers digging a well found terracotta soldiers. Archaeologists have spent 50 years excavating it. But here's the thing, they've never opened the main burial chamber. Why? Because ancient historians claim Qin Shi Huang was buried in a chamber with rivers of mercury. Modern sensors confirm The mercury levels in the soil above the tomb are so high that opening it could release toxic mercury vapor. 2,000 years later, Qin Shi Huang's tomb is still killing people. Even in death, he's dangerous. His terracotta army stands guard in museums now, each soldier's face unique, each warrior frozen in readiness. Tourists take selfies with them. Children run between the ranks. But if you look closely at those clay faces, really look, you see something disturbing. Some archaeologists claim the faces were modeled on real soldiers, that Qin Shi Huang had real warriors killed and their faces copied in clay so they could guard him forever. It's probably not true. Probably. But with Qin Shi Huang, you can never quite be sure where the cruelty ended. So here's what we know for certain. A traumatized child who grew up as a hostage learned that power is the only thing that matters. At 13, he tore his mother's lover apart with chariots. At 17, he began conquering kingdoms. At 25, he buried 50,000 surrendered soldiers alive. At 38, he declared himself first emperor. He spent the next 11 years building walls, burning books, burying scholars, and preparing a tomb so elaborate that it's still too dangerous to open. He died at 49 from mercury poisoning while trying to become immortal. His dynasty collapsed 15 years later. But his idea, one China, unified under one emperor, governed by one system of laws, survived for 2,000 years. Was it worth it? The 460,000 soldiers buried alive probably didn't think so. The million workers who died building the Great Wall probably disagreed. The 460 scholars buried in a pit probably had objections. But 2,000 years of Chinese history happened because one traumatized child refused to ever be powerless again. And that's the thing about tyrants. They're not born, they're made. By trauma, by humiliation, by fear, by a world that teaches them the only safety is absolute control. Qin Shi Huang didn't become a monster because he was inherently evil. He became a monster because in the world he grew up in, monsters were the only ones who survived. The 13-year-old boy, who ordered 50,000 men buried alive, did it because he'd learned that mercy was weakness, and weakness meant death. He was right. In that world, at that time, mercy would have killed him. Brutality kept him alive and made him emperor. The question isn't whether he was a tyrant. He was. The question is, what kind of world creates a 13-year-old who can watch 50,000 men suffocate in the earth and feel nothing? That's the real horror. Not that monsters exist, but that we create them. Qin Shi Huang unified China. He built wonders that still stand. He created systems that lasted millennia. And he did it all by learning at age 9 in an enemy kingdom that trusting anyone is dying slowly. So he trusted no one, showed mercy to no one, allowed nothing, not books, not history, not philosophy, not even death, to threaten his control. For 11 years, the most powerful man in the world. Then mercury poisoning killed him. And within 15 years, his dynasty was ash. But China, unified, standardized, centralized China, survived. His name was Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, the greatest builder and the worst tyrant in Chinese history. Both. Always both. And 2,000 years later, we still can't decide which mattered more. The empire he built, or the millions he killed building it. His tomb, sealed and toxic, sits under a hill in central China. The terracotta army stands guard. The mercury rivers flow in darkness, And somewhere in that poison chamber, surrounded by clay soldiers and real corpses, the first emperor lies in his jade suit, still believing he found immortality. In a way, he was right. We're still talking about him. We'll never stop talking about him. Because monsters who change the world don't get forgotten. They get remembered forever. And that might be exactly what he wanted.